The cost of being the strong one, when strength becomes your silence. You've always been the strong one, the one who keeps it together, the one who doesn't ask for help, the one who shows up no matter what it costs you. But at some point, that strength becomes a mask, a weight, a prison. You don't feel like you can fall apart. You don't feel like you're allowed to break. You've become so good at surviving, you've forgotten what it feels like to be supported. This episode is for you, the silent warriors, the fixers, the first responders of everyone else's emotional emergencies. We are going to talk about what it really costs to carry everyone else and how to honor your strength without losing yourself to it. Hey family, welcome back to the Get Up, Show Up, Never Give Up podcast, where we talk about healing, truth, and transformation. Not just the cute parts, but the real, gritty, soul-level work that it takes to grow into the version of yourself you are becoming. Today, we're talking about a subject that doesn't get enough attention in healing conversations. What happens when being strong becomes your identity, and how to let yourself be human again? Because strength is beautiful, but when it's the only thing you're allowed to be, it becomes a silent, heavy expectation, and that expectation will eat away at you emotionally, physically, spiritually. So if you've ever felt like the one who can't afford to fall apart, this one's for you. Let's talk about it. The role you didn't ask for. How being the strong one becomes a survival strategy. Let's start with hard truth. Most people don't choose to be the strong one. They become the strong one out of necessity. Maybe you grew up in a household where no one else could handle their emotions. Maybe you were the emotional caretaker before you even had words for your own feelings. Maybe you became the rock, the parent, the protector, because someone had to be. And somewhere along the way, it's stuck. People started to rely on you, expect you to handle everything. And without realizing it, you built your identity around being dependable, resilient, unshakable. But here's what no one talks about. That role wasn't a personality trait. It was a trauma response. Psychologists and trauma-informed experts refer to this as hyperindependence. And it's often rooted in attachment trauma or developmental neglect. According to a 2023 report published by Harvard Medical School, people who grow up in unpredictable or emotionally unsafe environments often develop exaggerated self-reliance, not because they wanted to, but because it was safer than trusting others. It's not that you didn't want support. It's that you learned it wouldn't come, so you stopped expecting it. Now, fast forward to adulthood, you've got people depending on you. You're the one people turn to when things fall apart. You're so strong, but inside you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're longing for someone to hold you the way you hold others. And yet, you still say, I'm fine. Even when you're not. The silent grief of always being fine. Let's talk about the emotional grief that comes from always being strong. There's a specific kind of loneliness that only strong people understand. The kind where you walk into a room full of people and feel invisible. Not because they don't love you, but because they don't check on you. They assume you've got it handled. They assume you're okay. Your strength has made you invisible to the people who should care. That's not just poetic, it's scientific. According to a longitudinal study from Stanford University, individuals who present as high functioning and emotionally regulated often receive significantly less interpersonal support during times of crisis than peers who display outward distress. Why? Because society is conditioned to respond to pain that's visible. If you don't cry, collapse, or ask for help, people assume you don't need any. But just because you've mastered your poker face doesn't mean your soul isn't bleeding behind the scenes. And this creates a silent grief, a quiet heartbreak. You show up for everyone, but no one shows up for you. You never let yourself break, because if you did, who would pick up the pieces? That question haunts you, and it's why so many strong people stay silent even when they're suffering. When resilience becomes a cage, the trauma behind strength. We love to glorify resilience. We wear it like a badge of honor. Look how much I've survived. Look how unbothered I am. Look how strong I've stayed. But resilience isn't always strength. Sometimes it's armor. Sometimes it's the only thing standing between you and a complete emotional collapse. There's a term in psychology called toxic resilience. It refers to the kind of strength that looks impressive, but is rooted in untreated pain. Here's how to know if you've crossed into that territory. You feel guilty when you rest. You downplay your own needs. You avoid asking for help. You minimize your trauma because others have it worse. You get uncomfortable when people offer you emotional support. That's not strength. That's survival. And your body knows the difference. According to the Mayo Clinic, chronic emotional suppression has been linked to increased risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, insomnia, and autoimmune issues. Your nervous system wasn't designed to stay in fight or flight forever. The same strength that kept you alive will eventually burn you out if you never put it down. It's not that you have to become weak. It's that you're allowed to be human, and that includes being soft, tired, vulnerable, messy. You don't lose your power when you ask for help. You lose your peace when you don't. The unspoken shame of being too capable. Let's go deeper into something no one admits out loud. When you're good at surviving, people stop checking in on your humanity. They don't mean harm, but they start seeing your function instead of your feelings. You're always so organized. You're the strong one. You never need anything. Does that sound familiar? So you just carry it quietly until resentment starts to build. Because deep down, part of you wonders, if I wasn't strong, would anyone show up for me? If I broke down, would they still love me? Do they see me or just what I can do for them? That's the internal shame of being the strong one. Not only are you not allowed to fall apart, you feel guilty for even wanting support. You've internalized the belief that your value comes from being useful. This belief is especially common in women and trauma survivors. According to a 2021 American Psychological Association white paper, these groups often face cultural or familial messaging that praise endurance while dismissing vulnerability. So when you finally do try to speak up, it feels like betrayal, like you're breaking some unspoken rule. That's not weakness, that's social conditioning. And unlearning it is part of healing. The physical cost of carrying emotional weight. Now let's talk about what being the strong one does to your body. Because emotional strength without regulation becomes physical stress. And your body, it keeps the score. In a landmark study published in the journal Psychosomatic medicine by researchers at Harvard and Columbia University, they found a direct correlation between chronic emotional suppression and increased risk of cardiovascular disease, weakened immune response, gastrointestinal issues, tension migraines, and chronic pain, accelerated aging markers like cortisol dysregulation. This isn't just about stress. It's about sustained internalized stress without relief. When you're always holding it together, your nervous system doesn't get a break. And if you were never taught to release emotional safety, your body becomes the storage unit for all that pain. Emotional regulation isn't just a self-care practice. It's life-saving. That's why so many strong people look fine until one day they're not. They hit a wall, burn out, collapse, and everyone is shocked because no one saw it coming. But their body saw it coming. It always knows. The invisible labor of holding everyone else together. Let's talk about what's not in your job description, but you do it anyway. You check in on everyone. You remember the birthdays, the deadlines, the emotional wounds. You hold space for the meltdown, the venting session, the family drama. You never unload, but you carry everyone else's baggage like it's your own. That is emotional labor, and it's unpaid, unseen, and constant. Dr. Devin Price, a social psychologist and researcher at Loyola University, explains this as empathetic overfunctioning. It happens when you overextend your emotional energy to compensate for the underfunctioning of others, often because it feels safer to manage them than risk being neglected yourself. You keep everything running smoothly, but it's draining your life force. And here's the truth. Just because you can carry it doesn't mean you should. You've become the container for everyone else's chaos. But who holds space for you? Healing doesn't mean abandoning others, but it does mean examining how many of your relationships are rooted in imbalance. Are you the strong one or the one who's afraid of what happens if you stop performing strength? What strength without softness costs us? Here's a truth that will set you free. Strength is not the opposite of softness. They are partners in healing. The kind of strength that ignores emotion is brittle. It looks powerful until it cracks. The strongest people you know are not the ones who never cry. They're the ones who know how to feel without drowning. They're the ones who can hold themselves without numbing. But if you've built your life around not needing anyone, you've also cut yourself off from intimacy, from connection, from rest. And eventually, that disconnect shows up in ways that hurt. You can't enjoy peace because you're always bracing for the next storm. You can't receive love because you don't believe you're allowed to fall apart. You reject softness in others because it mirrors the softness you've buried in yourself. That's the cost. When strength becomes your armor, nothing and no one can get in. You're not just protecting yourself from harm, you're protecting yourself from healing. Because healing requires openness, and openness requires softness. So the invitation here is not to abandon your strength, but to expand your definition of it. What if softness was also power? What if tears were also holy? What if being supported didn't make you weak? It made you whole. The fear of being a burden. One of the most hidden, paralyzing fears in people who are the strong one is this. If I open up, they'll leave. If I ask for help, I'll become a burden. If I fall apart, no one will catch me. This is rooted in lived experience. Maybe you did open up and someone changed how they treated you. Maybe you did break down and they withdrew instead of stepping up. Maybe you were punished for needing something, so you learned it's safer to stay silent, safer to be low maintenance, safer to overfunction than risk being perceived as too much. But here's what the research says. A 2020 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology showed that people who suppress their emotional needs to avoid burdening others are more likely to develop the following: anxious, preoccupied, or avoidant attachment patterns, emotional burnout, sleep disorders, depressive symptoms linked to internalized unworthiness. Avoiding vulnerability doesn't protect you from pain. It just delays it and redirects it inward. Because even if no one else hears your pain, your body and mind still do. The practice of being seen again. Let's talk about healing, not as a destination, but as a practice. One that invites you back into visibility without overwhelming your system. Here's what that looks like. Start with safe people. Not everyone deserves access to your vulnerability. Begin with the ones who've shown you consistency. Use low stakes honestly. I'm not okay today. I'm learning to ask for help, so this feels weird, but could you talk with me for a bit? Small disclosures rebuild trust with yourself. Use somatic anchoring. If vulnerability feels terrifying, pair it with physical grounding. According to Stanford Center for Compassion and Altruism research, placing your hand over your heart, deep belly breathing, or self-hugging while you speak activates the vagus nerve, calming the nervous system during emotional exposure. Track evidence, not reactions. Don't focus on whether people responded perfectly. Focus on your courage to share. That is your growth. This isn't about trauma dumping or oversharing. This is about peeling off the mask you didn't even know you wore, bit by bit, safely and intentionally. Rewriting the narrative you inherited. Let's call out something deep. Many of us didn't choose to be the strong one. We were raised in environments where survival required performance. You were the calm one, the helper, the achiever, the rock. You didn't get that identity because you wanted it. You got it because it helped you stay safe, needed, or accepted. But just because it served you then doesn't mean it serves you now. This is your permission slip to rewrite that story, not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown the mask. Your story doesn't have to be, I'm the one who never breaks. It can become, I'm the one who honors their limits and lets others love them back. And here's the truth. You don't owe anyone the version of you that kept their world from falling apart. Let them meet that version of you that chooses softness. Let them witness the one who says, I can't today. Let them get to know the you who feels instead of just functions. Because that version deserves love too, not just applause. Here's where we land. True strength is not about how much you endure in silence. It's about learning to live in truth, even when it's messy, even when it's inconvenient, even when people don't know how to handle it. And the truth is, you're not meant to hold everything alone. You're not failing because you're tired. You're not broken because you finally feel it all. You're human. You're healing. You're whole, even in your softness. Let go of that idea that healing means becoming a better performer of strength. Real healing often makes you quieter in your strength, more discerning, less available to chaos, more honest with your body, more protective of your peace. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. You're not just the strong one. You're the growing one. And that is sacred. Rebuilding with boundaries and grace. Now that we've uncovered the emotional pain of being misunderstood and the psychological toll of public perception, it's time to move into the empowerment phase, where you no longer live at the mercy of their outdated narrative. Let's talk about what reclaiming your story actually looks like when people refuse to update their version of you. Step 1. Validate your own growth, even if no one else does. People don't need to witness your transformation to make it real. That's the lie we've been told, that if no one else can verify it, it didn't happen. But you lived the work. You've cried through it. You've lost sleep over it. You've chosen different when it was easier to stay the same. That counts. That is evidence. You do not need outside confirmation to make your healing valid. This is what Dr. Kristen Neff refers to in her research on self-compassion as unconditional self-acceptance. It's the ability to honor your internal evolution without requiring anyone else to co-sign it. Let's have a reflection. What would it feel like to acknowledge your growth without needing applause? Say it with me. I no longer need spectators to confirm my transformation. Step 2. Redefine what correcting the record means. You don't owe anyone a press conference. You don't have to relive your worst mistakes just to prove that you've changed. You don't have to pull out emotional receipts to justify your healing. Correcting the record doesn't mean arguing. It means living so boldly, so honestly, so freely that your presence becomes your proof. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology shows that people are more likely to update their perception of someone through consistent behavioral change than through verbal explanations. In other words, just be who you are now. They'll either adjust or get left behind. But you don't have to do the adjusting anymore. Step 3. Protect your peace from narrative manipulation. When people won't update their version of you, they'll often try to manipulate your peace. They'll bait you into reacting. They'll accuse you of changing in a way that suggests betrayal. You need to understand, you're not betraying them. You're honoring you. Dr. Thema Bryant, psychologist and president of the American Psychological Association, teaches that peace is a boundary, not a reward. This means you are allowed to guard your energy without explanation. Set these boundaries. You don't need to correct every lie. You don't have to stay in circles where your evolution makes people uncomfortable. You are allowed to let them think what they want and still move forward. Let the misconception burn. You are not the fire department. Step 4. Stay on the healing path, even when it's lonely. There's something uniquely painful about growing faster than your environment. You'll be tempted to go back just to feel connection, even if it costs you clarity, dignity, or peace. Don't. Just keep going. A study from Stanford University on identity transformation showed that the longer someone stays in an environment that contradicts their growth, the more likely they are to self-sabotage, to return to familiar patterns. Don't dilute your future to feel safe in someone else's version of your past. Create new rooms where your name isn't tied to who you used to be. And if no room exists, build one. Your story is sacred, even if they don't respect the update. There will always be people who prefer the version of you that kept them comfortable. Let them. But You are not responsible for managing their comfort anymore. Your story belongs to you. And when you start healing in public, not for performance, not for praise, but for truth, you become unshakable. They may still be holding on to chapter 3, but you're already on chapter 10. You don't need them to read it to keep writing. I am not responsible for correcting their outdated version of me. I'm just responsible for living the truth of who I've become. This is your reminder. The version of you they're committed to is no longer your problem. The version of you you're becoming, that's the mission. If this hit you deep today, you're not alone. Share this episode with someone who's tired of being misunderstood and is ready to take their story back without apology. And remember, your life is your message. You don't need to defend what you're building. You just need to keep building it. I am proud of you for being here. Let's keep showing up even when they don't get it. Until next time, get up, show up, and never give up.